What's up, Truckee High? Welcome to TNT News. I'm Hayden Featherstone, and thank you for joining us today. On Wednesday, February 19th, Kevin Kiley, a United States representative, came to Truckee High School to answer students' questions and talk about how the government works. Here's some footage we have.
Thank you very much. Whoa, spotlights are a little bright. How you guys doing today? It's a little snowy out there. I live in about 30 miles outside Sacramento. We don't get a lot of snow. But this is my district, and in fact, my district, which is what we call the area that I am the congressman for, is the biggest in California. It's about 450 miles from north to south. So it includes Truckee, includes all of Nevada County. It includes all of the California side of Lake Tahoe. It even goes up to Lake Allenor. Anyone's been up there? And Lewis County. And then also includes Placer County, El Dorado County, and goes all the way down to Death Valley. Anyone ever been to Death Valley? So that whole chunk of California, if you live in there, I'm your member of Congress. We've got 52 of those what we call districts in California, each of which has their own different representative. And so this was, all right, the lights have dimmed. Thank you, I can see. Wow, all right. So that's the system that our founders gave us as far as how we can have a democracy that is functional, because we can't have all, almost 400 million Americans necessarily vote on every issue that comes up. But what you can do is have people designate someone to go and vote on their behalf. So the entire country is carved into these what we call districts, just different parts of the country, all of which have their own representative in Congress to be there to vote for them on things. So, and is anyone here old enough to vote yet? Maybe a few people. Okay, well, there you go. I guess probably maybe some of you were in the last election in November. How many of you actually voted in November? All right, not bad. So, and then the rest of you, you'll get the chance next year, or a lot of you will anyway. That's the way that you really exercise your power as a citizen in our democracy, is through your vote and choosing who it is that's going to go and represent you, not just actually in Washington, D.C., but at different levels of government. So for those of you who did vote, you noticed you had a pretty long ballot, right? You voted for president, you voted for United States Senate, you voted for United States House of Representatives, you voted for your state legislators, you voted at the state capitol, you voted for your city councilors, board of supervisors, and it's the job of those people who you vote for to represent your interests and fight for the things you care about at those different levels of government. So that's my job, is to represent you and fight for you at the national level in the U.S. House of Representatives. Has anyone been to Washington, D.C., by the way? All right. Anyone been to the U.S. Capitol? What you think? Pretty nice building? Yeah, it's pretty nice. If any of you ever come, let me know. Just give my office a call. Tell us that you're coming to Washington, D.C., and we'll give you a tour. We can give you a tour of the White House, whatever it is you want to see when you're there. We always love having visitors. And you come by and stop by my office. We actually have this board that shows that entire part of California I represent, that I just described, my district, and you can put a little pin on Truckee saying, all right, we were a visitor from Truckee who was here. I actually, I've been in the U.S. Congress for a little over 2 years now. I was elected in 2022, and I was just reelected in 2024. So as a United States congressman, as a member of the House of Representatives, you get 2 years, and then you have to face the voters again. That's kind of the unique thing about being an elected official, is that for those of you who have jobs, you have maybe one boss who you report to, and if you're not doing a great job, maybe they might hire someone else. Well, it works the same way if you're an elected official, but rather than having one boss, you have about 750,000 bosses, which is the population of your district. And if they see that you're not, voting the way that they like, or they don't think you're doing a good job, then they have the chance to vote you out in the next election. And so our founding fathers gave us these pretty short periods of 2 years. They call that your term. You have to run every 2 years. That way, the people really have a chance to hold you accountable and to weigh in. There's the U.S. Senate. That's actually, does anyone know how long their terms are? Yeah, go ahead. 6 years. So they get to kind of, yeah, that's worth a high five. All right, second try. Not bad. They do get the chance to, hang out a little bit before they have to face the voters again. But in the House, we're always subject to, it's just a continuous process of having to face the voters, and I think that's a good thing, because that's our job, is to be there to represent you, and we should be held accountable for it. But I was in the state legislature for 6 years before I was elected to represent you in D.C., and probably more of you have been at the state capitol, right? It's been at the state capitol. It's a similar thing there. It's when I was there, I actually didn't represent Truckee at the time. We did represent it. It's their job to represent you on state issues. So I'll tell you a little bit about what it's like to be in Congress. Has anyone ever actually watched the U.S. House of Representatives or the Senate on TV, on C-SPAN or anything, on the news? What's your reactions to it? What is it? Yeah, go ahead. Boring? Okay. That's one word. Sometimes, a lot of times it's boring. Another high five. All right. Anyone else? Any other reactions when you see it? What's it like? Yeah. Yeah, I think that's accurate. Absolutely. Anyone else? So, basically, my schedule works like this. I live in our district here, but whenever we're in session in Washington, D.C., which is usually 2 or 3 weeks out of the month, I'll fly there, so I spend a lot of time in airplanes. And sometimes I'll just fly in for the week, and then I'll fly home. But when we're in session, we usually have a lot going on in terms of actually addressing issues that are important to the country. So, the main thing we do is we pass legislation. Those of you who are in government, you probably studied this, right? How many of you are seniors in government right now? All right. So does anyone, I guess we're in, what month of the year are we in right now? You've been, of this semester, you're doing a full, is it a full year or is it like a term?
It's like a term.
It's a term. So you're just starting. So nevertheless, you probably covered how a bill becomes a law, right? Anyone want to give us a brief overview? You got a lot of answers here. You've got a streak going. I'm going to give someone else a chance. Does anyone know how you get a bill actually passed into law? Anyone? Good. Okay, it's on the right track. Do you want to add that? Yeah, so you're on the right track. So a bill is just an idea for a new law. So, what's one example? Does anyone use TikTok? So there was a bill this last year that you might have heard about. Anyone hear about the TikTok bill? Yeah, what do you think about that? So there was a bill to say, basically, we're not going to allow TikTok to operate anymore if it retains its same ownership. So some call it the TikTok ban. So in order for that bill to actually become a law, just because someone has an idea for a bill, that doesn't do anything. What you have to do, and any member of Congress can introduce a bill as an idea, as a possible law. I can do that, as can the other members of Congress, but you have to get people to vote for it. So you have to get a majority in the House of Representatives. There's 435 of us. You have to get over half of those people to pass it and say we want this to be a law. Then you have to get the same in the Senate, and then the president has to sign. And if it goes through that process, then you actually have a law, which it did in the case of the TikTok bill. So right now, there's a process of trying to negotiate new ownership so that TikTok can stay on your phones. But I think right now you can't even download it, right? It's still, you can download it for a while, they had that on pause. But basically, there's a period right now where they're trying to find new ownership. But that's just an example of how what we call the legislative process works. A lot of the work of the House actually in Congress at the Capitol consists of committees. So you have individual committees, which are smaller groups of us that focus on particular topics. For example, I'm on the Transportation Committee. We deal with building our roads. I'm also on the Education Committee. I'm the chair, actually, of a subcommittee on education, and we deal with issues related to schools. And so when you're voting on a bill with the whole House, it's just kind of you debate it at a very high level, and then you vote yes or no. But in committees, you really dive into the topics in detail and give the possible bills, possible laws a lot of scrutiny. So that's what we do in the House. But then there's another big part of my job, and that's to be present in the district, which is what I'm doing right now, visiting with you guys. You're called my constituents. So I'm your representative, or your congressman, you're my constituents, because you're the people that live in my district, who it's my job to represent. And when I'm passing laws, making laws, doing things in DC, my first priority is always, okay, what's going to be good for the folks in my district? Because there are 435 members of the House, but you only have one of them that represents you. That's me. And so it's my job to be your advocate and your representative. And so I'm always looking at trying to help our communities here in whatever way I can. So to give you one example, like the Truckee Police Department. They needed new radios to be able to communicate better. There's a lot of issues with the weather and other things that happen here that can make it difficult. So we were able to get some federal funding to get them some new radios. Or when things happen here locally, we have to try to help with response. So who remembers Snowmageddon a couple years ago? You've had a lot of storms, but that was just insane, right? Absolutely out of control. Did you guys go to school during that time? I'm sure school was canceled, right? For some of the time, maybe. Did anyone lose your power or anything like that? So we were dealing with these issues. Roads were closed, power lines were down, even some roofs were starting to cave in because snow was piling up on top of them. So we had to try to work with people to get federal resources to help with all of those issues. Or even if you have an individual issue as a constituent, like, is anyone here a senior filling out the FAFSA? All right, there you go. The education department in DC did a very bad job with FAFSA last year. There's still some issues. Maybe you guys are dealing with that. So we actually are trying to help people with their FAFSAs, and we actually even created a new law to make the FAFSA process work better. Or, if your parents are having an issue with their tax return, or maybe your grandparents with their Social Security check or their Medicare, or maybe they're a veteran and they can't get access to their veterans benefits, their VA benefits. Or has anyone traveled abroad lately to another country? Yeah? Where'd you go? Any place interesting? Yeah. New Zealand? Oh, man. That sounds cool. I'm over there. Italy. All right. I love Italy. Where did you go in Italy? Okay, very nice. So when you travel abroad, you have to present your passport, right? You can't travel anywhere outside the country without a passport. But sometimes people have trouble getting their passport sometimes. So we help with that process. So that's all to say that if you're ever having an issue like that with the government and you need help, you should always feel free to give my office a call. And we'll do what we can to help you out. Because that's what we're here for at the end of the day. And back here is actually James. He's our district representative. Because I spend a lot of my time in Washington, D.C. He's able to be around here when I'm not. So that's a little bit about what we do. I would be happy to answer any questions if you have any. Maybe I'll have a teacher can call on you.
All right. Oh, here's, yeah, sorry. So, something I saw that you kind of have used a lot in your like kind of like political philosophy was like, or I've just heard you say it a bunch, was that California is not like a model, it's a warning. And I was just confused on what you meant by that. I was wondering if you could give some clarification.
Sure. I think that well, California is where I was born and raised, and I love California. I think it's the greatest state in the country. I think that we've had some challenges when it comes to the way that the state has been managed. And so I've been pretty critical of some of the policies when it comes to how well our forests are managed for protecting fire. When it comes to the fire insurance rates we have here, where people are having to pay so much, and just the general cost of living in California, it's more expensive to live here in a lot of ways than pretty much anywhere in the country. So I have advocated for reforms in those areas where I think that there are better policy options available to improve the quality of life for folks here. Other questions?
I actually have two.
All right.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Are you like afraid to to showcase or to speak of your political views?
I don't believe so. No.
No. Okay. And my second one is that you said earlier that you help people get their passports, or people having trouble getting their passports. Are you also like on support of supporting or like being affiliated with programs such as like DACA that help like green card and visa?
Like DACA, you said? Well, so, I mean, DACA is, I think something that a lot of Americans view very favorably because, there's, I think, a belief that, young people who have made this country their home deserve access to opportunity. So I think you're going to see some, constructive work on that area coming up pretty soon.
Sorry. What's your view on abortion?
You guys are really throwing some softballs out there, huh? So I believe, and there's actually an easy answer to that for me, because I'm a federal representative. So what does federal mean? That just means I'm a national representative. I'm in the United States Congress. And it's my belief that those matters should be decided by the state, not by the national government. And California actually has a process where citizens can vote on things directly. Most of the laws that are state laws in California are passed by the legislature. There's actually like thousands of them every year, a lot of laws. Then there's a handful of them that are called propositions, so people can vote on the ballot. Those of you who voted last year, you remember voting on these propositions? And one of those a couple years ago was related to the topic of abortion. And the people in California basically placed it in the Constitution as a constitutional right in our state. So that's something that's now even beyond the ability of the state legislature to really change, because it's been put directly into the state constitution by a vote of the people.
Regarding your gas car ban, why are you pushing to reverse it, and what are some alternatives?
Well, I don't think we should have a ban. I'm in favor of choice for consumers. So I think that's the alternative. I'm actually a strong advocate for EVs, and I think that there's going to become more and more, prevalent. But it doesn't make sense for all people, and I think it's important people have choices.
On top of like the car ban, what's your plan to like control emissions in California other than that?
To control emissions, well, the most important thing is we need to mitigate the risk of wildfires. Wildfires are actually the largest cause of emissions by far. In fact, if you go back to 2020, we had a number of fires that year, and there were more emissions released that year than there were emissions that were saved in all of the programs designed to stop emissions for the previous 16 years. So the most important thing to help our environment and to stop emissions is to prevent wildfires. So I've tried to advocate bringing more resources to our district, which we've done actually. Record amounts of money have come for the sake of managing our forests and trying to prevent wildfires. I do, though, think that clean energy is really important, and I'm a strong advocate for it, and I think that's what the future is. You know, we've got a lot of incredible innovation going on right now in a number of areas when it comes to clean energy, and I'm very supportive of that.
I had a question about a bill that you had introduced about the No Medicaid for Illegal Immigrants Act. And I was wondering, apart from like California saving $8 billion and it being fair for like American citizens, is there like anything else that had made you like come up with that decision?
Well, California is the only state that does it, and that's really, I don't think, should be a priority. Right now, we have a lot of needs in our state budget for folks that are our own, you know, lawful residents that we have really failed to account for. So I think it's just a matter of priorities.
What's your take on Trump's proposed plan to take over and rebuild Gaza?
Well, I don't know that he's put a plan per se. I think there's been some comments on it that I think is what you're referring to. But you know, I think that the president wants to see that area thrive, and obviously there's been you know, a lot of challenges there for a long time, and so I don't think there's any concrete plan at this point, but they're looking at different possibilities, and I think it'd be a great thing if it can become you know, prosperous and serve the move on peace.
On the note of wildfires, do you have concerns about President Donald Trump's shrinkage of the Federal Forestry Service and what are representatives doing to maintain the forest health?
Well, I mean, I can tell you what I think, which is that we need to make forest management a very high priority, which is what I've advocated for since I've been in office, and we've really gotten a lot of resources for that here that's making a big difference. I think that you know, there's always a lot of uncertainty at the beginning of a new administration when you have changes in personnel and so forth, and so you know, I believe that the president actually thinks California needs to do more to manage its forests as well, and so I think that, and I'm certainly going to be doing everything I can to work with the administration and work with colleagues on both sides of the aisle to make sure that happens.
Hi, can you please share some of your views on protection of LGBTQ+ rights in current policy?
Well, I absolutely believe it's important that everyone have the ability to express themselves and to be who you are. And so I don't think there's really any interest, certainly not on my part, to do anything that would run contrary to that.
So I know you mentioned that you've supported in the past positions to help physically. The first responders mentioned the radios, for instance, with the police department. Has there been any sort of push for the more mental aspect? I know there's sort of this oncoming crisis that's being revealed of the PTSD and trauma that a lot of first responders have experienced. Do you know if there's any push in that, trying to help them in the more mental sensitive?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the answer is yes, there is. There have been programs that are designed to assist law enforcement with those PTSD type issues. There are a lot of community-based groups too that I've been to their events and have supported that assist not only officers but their families as well. It can be, you know, it could be very traumatic for you know, a husband or a wife who has their spouse go out and is putting themselves you know, at risk every day. So I think you're right to identify this as an area that we haven't given enough attention to, and I think it's important that we find ways to support people both while they're serving and after their service, because we're learning more and more about how that can affect people. Great question.
I have two questions, but the first one is, are you going to be pushing more people into that first responder, like fire, EMS? And the second one is, who has the best who has the best snack drawer in the house?
Snack drawer. Oh, snack drawer. I don't know. Yeah, our snacks aren't great. I tend to have healthy things, so people don't like that sometimes. But the question about getting people into careers in fire, first responders, law enforcement, absolutely. I mean, they actually have a great program you guys are a little ways from South Tahoe, but at the college there, where they're training a lot of first responders and firefighters that have actually been on the front lines during some of the recent fires. And law enforcement too, honestly, we've had a lot of issues with police departments that have not been able to recruit people and to be fully staffed. And that creates risks when, you don't have people that you need. So I've actually tried to support efforts to get more people into law enforcement. One of the things that we do is I have what I call the police honor roll every year, where we recognize outstanding officers throughout my district. I think we had a couple people recognized from Nevada County this last time around. But yeah, it's really important, and I don't know if you're interested in that kind of career, but I think it's good that we have programs in schools as well, to like at the secondary level, career training programs that get people headed down that path. Is that what you're working towards?
Yeah, because I know we have the fire and the EMT side in Truckee High.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
I'm in one of them right now.
So you do, what kind of basic training do you get?
It's EM March, so you get your emergency medical responders, and then the other sides, there are other classes you get like the basic physical principles of the firefighting.
That's great to hear. That's awesome. All right.
So back to like the health of our forests, the recent cut in national park workers, like what's your view on that, and how do you think it's just going to overall impact like our national park services and help with the...
Well, there's been a pause in some areas, and I think that the administration is evaluating staffing needs right now, and at some point Congress is going to weigh in as well. So I don't know that the end result of this is going to be a diminished capacity to manage our forests. Certainly that would not be a good outcome in my view. So I'm absolutely going to make sure that we're continuing to get the work done here that we need to get done.
Do you think that cannabis should be legal throughout the entire United States instead of just some states? And what is your personal stance on cannabis for recreational use?
Well, what do you think?
Yeah. I'm a freshman. Like, what do you think?
What do you think? We can decide that.
I think it is good in some situations, and is good if utilized in the right way and right times. What do you think?
Yeah, I think fair enough. Yeah, we're getting more and more data on how it's played out in the different states, and it's a complicated area because I think the medicinal uses are important for people. And then when you look at what's happened in California with recreational use, so we legalized it, but that kind of had an unanticipated effect, which was to create this huge black market for cannabis, which we have all these illegal grows, as we call them. There's some in Nevada County, there's a ton in Yuba County, and you actually go to these places, they're siphoning off electricity, they're siphoning off water, they are committing massive human rights abuses in a lot of cases, there's all kinds of other illegal activity going on there because we've legalized cannabis and then it's been taxed and it's been regulated, so it's more profitable for people just to do it outside of the system. And then there's also been issues that have come up around impaired driving. We're seeing more and more evidence of impaired driving, and we still don't necessarily know how to measure that. With alcohol, it's easy. You can do it with a breathalyzer. We say, okay, if you're at 0.08, you're impaired, or or at least that's the presumption. We don't have as good of standards when it comes to cannabis. And then you have these just kind of strange dynamics where you have it being legal in the state but not at the federal level. So if you're a legal licensed cannabis operator, you run into issues getting a bank account and a whole host of other complications. So, the situation right now is, I'd say, still a little unsettled. And, I personally want to see a little more evidence about how it's playing out at the state level.
Is it me? It's me. Okay, perfect. One question I had was, where do you get your philosophy politically for stuff that you do? Because I know you support limited government and education stuff, and you're more for businesses doing stuff on their own. I'm just wondering what influenced that style of the way that you do things. Where did you get that from?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I don't know that there's any one particular source. I mean, I think that I feel like the community that I grew up in was a great place to live and to grow up and to recreate and everything else, and for people to start a family there. And so I think I absorbed some of the values of that community. You guys live in a great community here in Truckee as well. But I think that, one important thing to know is to use the word philosophy. And yeah, you need to have, everyone has kind of a governing philosophy, and you mentioned limited governance and other things. But, being a representative and governing is really not, at the end of the day, philosophy. It's actually a practical thing that affects people's lives, where you're making real decisions as to what's legal and what's not legal, and where money goes and where it doesn't go. And even we vote on things related to war and peace and life and death. And so, the philosophy can only take you so far, and the most important kind of source of input that you get when you make a decision is how it's actually going to affect you. And so, when I'm voting on a bill, whatever the case may be, let's say it's a bill about healthcare. I want to hear from the hospitals and the providers in my district. I was actually just on the phone with one of them from Nevada County on my drive over here. If it's a bill about education, I want to hear from the schools in my district. How's that going to affect you? If it's a bill regulating businesses, I want to hear from business owners in my district. How's that going to affect you? Because your philosophy might tell you one thing, but the real on-the-ground consequences are, at the end of the day, what really matters. It's a good question.
Sorry, can I jump in? This is a question from a student. You're going to be here, so I just get to read it. What policies or initiatives do you support regarding water conservation while also protecting critically endangered steelhead and salmon populations?
Well, I think we need to save more of our water. A big problem is that we get all this rain or snow or what have you, and a lot of it we don't get to keep because the reservoirs are full, the dams are full, and then what happens? It has to run out to the ocean, or in the worst case, it might cause flooding. So I think we need more places to store our water so that when it rains a lot, it's like, okay, we can save the water we don't need at this moment, and then once it gets dry, we got this leftover water, we can use it. So we don't need to have all of these measures telling people to cut back on their water use or taking water away from farmers or that sort of thing. When it comes to the fish population, there's a lot of debate about all of this. I will say that one of the big reservoirs that's in the process of being built, it's actually the first in a long time, it's called Sites Reservoir. It's a little north of here. It's going to store about 1.5 million acre feet. And that's what's called an off-stream reservoir. So it doesn't actually create a dam, and that doesn't actually disturb the fish population when you go that way.
President Trump has recently publicly issued multiple executive orders banning DEI in the workplaces and in the military, and so I just wonder what does diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace mean to you, as a congressman and citizen of the U.S.?
Well, I think that the important principle that this country was founded on was equal opportunity and equality before the law. the idea that all people are created equal. And I think that's the essence of what he's trying to do there, as well as making sure that organizations are focused on their mission. So, when it comes to our military, it's really important that we have a military that does its job well. That's all of our safety and security. And so I think what he's saying when it comes to an organization like the military is let's focus on, having a good military and making sure that we're safe, and maybe, some of these other things really are not necessarily the priority there. So I think that's kind of the guiding principles is let's have equality before the law, and let's make sure that our agencies are doing the job they're supposed to do.
Is there any plan or put in place to, in regarding the price in California? Because the minimum wage that people are making are not matching what we have to spend on food, gas, or houses, and the current population of college students can't even afford an apartment. So is there any plans regarding that?
Absolutely. That's such an important question. And it's kind of what we were talking about earlier. I mean, Truckee, I know the housing here is incredibly expensive. But California in general, we have the highest energy costs in the country, highest gas prices in the country, highest housing prices maybe outside of like Hawaii and maybe New York. We pay the most for just about everything. And you're right, that makes it more and more difficult for people to live here. It makes it difficult for families, makes it difficult for young people like yourself who want to go to college or even starting your career. So I think there's a few things that explain that, and and I'll tell you what we're working on to address it. The first thing is just inflation, which has caused the price of everything to go up. And the reason we had inflation is because the government spent too much money. And the government spends more money than it has, and that decreases the value of our dollars. And it causes them to be worth less. And so that's why inflation went up. So we really have to get that under control. I mean, when you look at the size of our national debt, does anyone know how big it is? Okay, yeah, which one is anyone else? That's about right. It's like 37, upwards of 36, close to 37 trillion. That seems like a lot. How do you get your mind around that amount of money, right? It's so much money. And so what does that mean when we have that much debt? Well, you've probably heard people say that's for your generation, that's a problem we're going to be giving to you, and it's irresponsible to do so. That's all very true. But what it also means is that we are indebted to others for all of that money. And so what do you have to do when you're paying back a debt? Like if you went and took out a loan from the bank for $10,000, would you just have to pay back $10,000? You have to pay interest, right? You have to pay $10,000 plus interest. So that's what we're having to do with all of our borrowing, because we're spending more money than we actually raise through tax revenues. And so we as a country have to pay back interest on this money that we're borrowing. And so at this point, if you look at how much we're spending in the federal government, we have $800 billion that we're spending this year just on interest on the national debt. And so that's money that isn't going for defense or education, it's just going to pay interest. So anyway, that's a little bit of a tangent, I'm sorry. But that's the number one thing that we have to do is get spending under control. The other thing is energy. Energy is what you pay at the gas station, or if you're charging your EV, you pay for it there, or just the basic electricity in your home. And then it also, the price of electricity or of gas and power goes into the cost of everything else. Because, companies have to move around their products, and it costs them more to buy gas to move around their products. That is reflected in the final cost of the product, or just the power that it takes to keep the lights on in their store and everything else. So that's the second thing that we can do to bring the cost of things down, is to lower the price of energy. And the way I think that we do that is by making more of our energy in the United States. If we make more of our energy here, it's a lot cleaner than when we ship it from overseas, and it costs a lot less. So we're trying to work on that. And then the housing issue is is the biggest thing maybe for many people. Just that's the biggest expense you have is your housing. And the basic problem in California is we haven't built enough of it, and then we've made it really expensive to build. So there's all these laws and regulations that make you wait years and years, maybe decades, sometimes, before you can start building a particular project. And then even then, you're paying tens of thousands of dollars just for fees and everything else to get it off the ground. So I think we need to make it easier to build in California, and that'll lower the cost of housing. But yeah, I think it's really a central challenge for us in California, so we need to make the state more affordable.
So I had a question about what you do to plan on combating potential inflation of agriculture, especially as there's more deportation of undocumented workers, especially in the Central Valley.
Well, I think that it will be important to have, and I think we should have it, now, because there needs to be more programs to allow people to come and work legally as agricultural workers, and frankly in other areas as well. Because you're right, a lot of farmers, do need help. And so I think it makes all the sense in the world for us to make sure that they have a legal means of getting that help, and I think it's a win-win for everyone. And agriculture is huge in California. It's a big industry. They create the food that all of us eat. They have huge challenges because of these labor issues you're talking about, also because of the water supply, and a lot of other factors too. So, it's a good question. Thank you.
Going back to the topic of first responders, there are over 12,000 veterans living on the streets alone in California with extreme PTSD. Is there anything you plan to change or take action to prevent this amount of veterans living on the streets?
Yeah, it's a truly sad situation. I work a lot actually with the veterans community here in Nevada County. You've got a great veterans service operator that helps folks there as well. And we're actually doing what we call a pinning ceremony next month in Nevada County. I think we're doing it in Grass Valley, right, James? For Vietnam veterans who, for those of you who have taken U.S. history, you might remember that public opinion turned against the war, and in a lot of cases, that unfortunately meant that the veterans were not treated the way that they should have been, and were not honored in the way that they should have been. Because regardless of what you think of the war they're involved in, I think we need to honor our veterans for their service. And so a lot of them didn't get that recognition. So what we've tried to do is do these pinning ceremonies where we give them special pins that have been created for Vietnam veterans. Well, we've done several of these already, and it really means a lot to the veterans. But there's also the Veterans Stand Down. If you're familiar with that, it's something that Nevada County does over at the fairgrounds, where we try to get services to veterans, and does include homeless veterans as well. Basic access to dental and medical care, and housing and other things like that. But I do think we need to be more serious about the homeless issue in general in California, to have ways for people to get not only access to shelter, but access to the services they need to turn their lives around. And if you're a veteran, we need to have that available through the VA as well for folks who have PTSD, like you said, to make sure that they get the help they need.
I had a question on what your opinion was on about the opioid crisis and how you're going to combat it.
Yeah, it's one of the biggest issues we've ever dealt with as a country, and I'm sure that many of you have friends or know people who have been affected by the opioid crisis. It's just getting scarier in terms of the lethality of these pills that are coming mostly across the border. They actually originate in China. In most cases, they hook up the precursor chemicals there, and then a lot of times the cartels south of our border are involved in then putting them into pill form, and then they're brought across the border. I think there's a lot that we can do. I've actually sponsored legislation to work on this issue, and awareness, I think, is a big part of the equation. So I've worked with families who have lost a loved one to fentanyl poisoning, and we've worked on ways to get into schools. Maybe I have a program there. I don't know if this is been done at this high school, but it's been done at a lot of high schools in our region, where you have family members who have lost loved ones who will come in and will share their stories. We'll have law enforcement come in and tell people what to look out for, what to be wary of, the way that these predators, the dealers, target people on social media and whatnot. So I think that's a big part of it. I also think, frankly, we need to have stiffer criminal penalties for those who distribute fentanyl. It's a lethal substance, and unfortunately, California doesn't have probably the penalties that it should. It kind of still considers it more like any other drug, whereas we know now that fentanyl is the leading cause of death for young people in this country, which is a pretty striking fact. I mean, it's more people die from it in your age bracket than die in car accidents, die of opioid, of fentanyl. So there's been some signs that maybe we made a little bit of progress, but it continues to be a crisis that is ravaging far too many communities in this country.
So we only have time for one more question. I know a lot of you have really great questions to ask.
Yeah, this is great.
But we just have about time for one more.
Yeah, so I noticed that there has been a substantial economic loss due to the LA fires. I believe it's around $250 billion. And many of the families affected by the wildfires, their insurance payouts are not enough. So I'm wondering if there are any steps being taken to support those families and helping to rehouse them.
Yes, there are. Great question, and I'm actively working on that right now. We're looking to get a federal aid package out pretty soon, in the next few weeks, probably, maybe next month, to give help to those folks. I do think that a lot of times, in some of these fires, people haven't gotten the help that they need. I mean, Nevada County's had a couple bear fires, and a few that have been significant in this region. I represent other counties, like I mentioned before, like Lewis County had an enormous fire. El Dorado County had the Calder Fire, one of the biggest in the state history. And people have lost their homes, have lost everything. And it's too difficult, I think, a lot of times for them to get the help they need and to rebuild and to recover.